All right, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are or whenever you're watching this. Welcome to Lagniappe Leadership Discussion, episode number 3. This one's entitled Leading in Combat in Sports and in Small Business with Dylan DK Newman. I will tell you, this is probably the hardest one to set up because in order to get this guest speaker, I had to go all the way to Colorado. I had to run in the mountains. And I like to run, but I will tell you about 90 seconds into the run, I started to walk. And so Dylan was very gracious. It was the most arduous prep session I've ever had for a forum. And so thanks for dragging me around. I think we only did like 4 miles in 3 days or something, it felt like, but thanks. But yeah, so it's my privilege to introduce my longtime friend, DK Newman. Dylan is a graduate of our United States Air Force Academy. And shortly after graduation, I met DK as we were new Air Force officers at a now school that doesn't exist, Air and Space Basic course. Back then it was called ABC, and they renamed it because that was probably not a good thing to send lieutenants to. So DK and I met there for the first time, and both of us were prepping to go into our first career fields, and DK was going to be an OSI agent, and did that for a little bit, and then he likes the term special, and so he became a special tactics officer, and did that for the bulk of his career. And then towards the end of his career, in great Air Force fashion, he got to return back to the Air Force Academy and help do some football coaching as well as some leadership coaching as he prepared today and tomorrow's future Air Force officers at the Academy. Following that, he went into industry, and Dylan's a little bit of a excitement junkie, as you could say, and so he went to forge adventure race courses around the U.S. for a little while, and took care of that. And then, not to be outdone, he started his own business, which you could see in the background, which is where people pay him to shoot each other with Nerf darts. And he's done that so well that he's about to open his second facility, which is massive, there in Colorado Springs, and then is now working on franchising. So DK, welcome. On top of all that, you're a husband to another retired Air Force officer, Deb Newman. You have 3 amazing kids. You foster kids. You help coach JV football. You do everything to include dragging your portly Air Force friend around a park. And so, with that as a brief intro, what else did I miss in your bio?
Oh man, I think you hit everything, man. Except that it wasn't as awful as you thought for that run, man. It was eye opening for you, I bet. But you weren't that bad, man. You just had to catch your breath for a second.
Yeah, indeed. I appreciate the drag around. Okay, so DK, we with that as an intro, we talked about all the different facets of leadership that you've experienced in your life, all the ups and downs across the community. So what I'd like to do is kind of focus it in each little section, if you will, your professional experience, and then we'll kind of speak to an overarching piece. So, when you first came in the Air Force, you went into a very small career field, and what was it like leading as an officer, where actually, most people don't know you're an officer early, but what was it like leading in that environment?
Yeah, so that was unique because of the fact that, like you just said, it's such a small leadership environment. I went into a medium-sized detachment, and I think there was about 12 of us total, right? And thrown right into that leadership role, but you're still trying to figure out what you're doing. It's kind of like a lot of lieutenants out there, right? You're thrown into a leadership role, but then you're like, man, I got to really figure out what I'm doing here as a job. And the different aspect of that was, unlike being, a comm officer or a maintenance officer, where you're leading the subject matter experts, the wrench turners, the ones that are doing all the work, and you're trying to figure out all aspects of that job. As an OSI agent, I was running cases just like the other civilians and enlisted agents out there. So I was really heavily leaning on those folks that have been around a long time. And I think, like any good officer, when you first go in, to any situation, you lean on your experts before you start trying to throw your rank or your weight around, because that doesn't work so well when you got some pipe hitters with you that have been around, and yeah, you technically outrank them, but holy cow, they've got all the experience and the knowledge, right? So in the beginning there, I was heavily relying on my NCOs and the civilians that were in the detachment. And I tell you what, that just set me up for success, because going on through the rest of my career, jumping into special tactics, that's when it's very eye opening to you get to a team and you walk into a team room as a guy that is supposed to be leading all these pipe hitters, and they've got 10 plus deployments under their belt, silver stars, bronze stars, all that kind of stuff, and it's pretty intimidating. But at the same time, it is an awesome challenge to be able to go into those scenarios or situations and be with those kind of amazing Americans, and be able to try to take care of them. That's what I look at leadership as being, is taking care of those folks that need that top cover. And I learned that very fast through my early years of OSI and early years as a young team leader, having some just phenomenal NCOs and team sergeants that, man, just took me under their wing, and I was trying to be a sponge to learn.
It's awesome. So you walked us through, your initial experience with a small team. Obviously, special tactics is not a large team, right? But you move into that, different team dynamics, different
Yep.
skill sets, different expertise, different levels of impact or approach and mission set. So you didn't spend all your career small with the teams. You had to move into staff. And so how did you take that that leadership experience from those small teams and then go into leading in a hierarchical structure? That was where you and I reconnected again in the AFSOC orderly room, if you will,
Yeah.
after not seeing each other for about 10 years. But, how did you transition your leadership experience and approach to leading, mainly a civilian workforce, and then trying to outfit the battlefield airmen?
So yeah, so that was well, I got thrown into the staff world, we'll call it, after I got injured. I got moved back to AFSOC headquarters after I got injured, because there at Hurlburt they had some amazing neurosurgeons out there. I broke my back, and then once I was medevaced out and got back and got moved to Hurlburt, I had my surgery. I was doing well. They said, we're going to put you in a staff job. So I was kind of just thrown in it, right? I wasn't qualified to be on a team right at that point, physically. So instead of just having me sit around a team room, they threw me into the staff world. And, it was amazing and hard at the same time. Amazing for the fact that what I loved about it was I say 9 to 5, but nothing's truly a 9 to 5. But compared to the ops tempo I was just coming from, it was a 9 to 5. And my son was 2 years old at that point. And man, I those 2 years, I was gone 18 months of it, off and on, just random deployments, TDY kind of things. So when I got to the staff job and going, man, I was probably the only guy in AFSOC headquarters thinking, this is an amazing job. Because I got to walk over, have lunch with my son. I was in a little bit different branch or part of AFSOC headquarters, to where it was combat controllers, myself, a PJ, and one civilian. So it was kind of like being in a team room anyway. So it was a nice environment. We were working only special tactics issues. So again, I think I was pretty sheltered. I wasn't thrown into, like you say, kind of hierarchical, pretty stringent staff job. It was more like being in a squadron. It was unbelievable. So again, it was a a different aspect of having to learn how to lead, because now in the team room, you can handle things a lot different than you can in in a staff board, a staff meeting and all that kind of stuff, where pretty much I'd be the lowest ranking guy trying to, advocate that. So that's where it really turned my leadership into true advocating, true diplomacy, if you will, honing those skills. Because again, you can't really force a whole lot of stuff in a staff world, because there's always going to be bigger fish and there's always going to be bigger problems. So it really honed my skills to be a negotiator, to be a diplomatic approach to things versus try to smash rocks kind of deal. And then right after that, I took all the physical tests. I got put back on status. I'm like, all right, I'm ready to get back to the team. Where are you guys sending me? They go, hey, you did a great job here at AFSOC headquarters. We're going to send you to the Pentagon. So I kind of did that to myself. So apparently I did too well at the staff job not to go back to the team, or at least that's what I delude myself in thinking, that I did really well, that they didn't want me to go back to a team. But all joking aside, I got moved to the Pentagon level, to where now I'm advocating at the half level for special tactics, and it just, I wouldn't have been able to do it very well if it wasn't for that AFSOC headquarters time of learning all those different aspects of being a leader in a staff role.
Yeah, so you're almost speaking to over time during your career. At this point, you're at the 14-15 year point of your career when you went to that amazing building, the Pentagon. And so, you've evolved. Hey, I loved my time there. So you evolved your leadership because you're getting different experiences. And so following the Pentagon time, it was time to move into a different leadership environment. So explain that transition.
Yep. So, the good thing about special tactics is the very small, the very small number of people, right? So I knew all the decision makers of where we move, because within special tactics, all our decisions of where every one of our guys go as far as officers is handled at the wing, at the special tactics wing. And then it gets sent down to AFPC just to kind of stamp it. And that's just the simplified version. So, I was able to discuss with the decision makers at the wing, saying, hey, I know I'm going to retire at 20. I'd love to get back to the academy and, find a way to coach football, that kind of thing. I convinced enough people. They sent me back to the academy to where I was going to try to coach football. And I got put as the chief of military training for the academy. So that was, again, yet another learning experience for me. Because yes, I'm used to running training. I'm used to getting guys ready for deployments. So that was the easy part, but doing it on a scale of 4,000 cadets, and getting not being emotionally tied to my personal belief on how something should be done, because there's a lot of stuff that happens at the academy that people keep saying, well, we've done it here, forever. This is the way we do it. And when you have a commandant that says, hey, I want to prepare these guys for the world they're going to face when they graduate. So I ran with that. And it was a very eye-opening thing of how many people stood in the way, not only, current officers, but retired officers that worked within the AOG that used to be 2 or 3 star generals, that used to do stuff that were like, no, it's our tradition here at the academy, and would squash things about literally training cadets. And so it was very frustrating. But, when you have the current, general staff on board with your mindset. Now, here's the other part is within the commandant's chain, I had operated with them downrange multiple times for numerous years. So what was great is I had some buy-in from them that they trusted what I was saying. So it was great that when 06 pluses were trying to shoot stuff down, it got to the generals, they'd be like, well, tell me why you don't think his idea is a great idea. And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to be in this room. But it was just interesting that, operational experience, operating with these guys that are making these decisions, they had buy-in at the time of what I was saying and backed me on that. So that was really neat. But again, it was a great learning experience of, you gotta find a way to lead the folks that are in your branch. You got to find a way to make things happen and get the best product for those cadets. So that was great. That was about a year that I did that. And then I was able to weasel my way down to the football team and the athletic department. So the next 3 years prior to retirement, I coached. 2 years I coached with the varsity team, and then 1 year I went down to the prep school and coached there. So I got to finish my career where I started, because I went to the prep school, and that was really neat, being able to retire out of the prep school coaching football.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like an amazing opportunity. I mean, your whole military career, sort of the whole broken back thing.
Yeah.
And finding, like many of us do, finding a spouse with low standards is pretty helpful.
Absolutely.
So you talked almost about how you had to lead with, there's a vernacular out there that articulates kind of the frozen middle, right? It's that those entities between the senior decision maker and the doers that are really like, I'm not really bought in, and I'm not going to do that. And so, you're used to flanking maneuvers, you're used to finding the X and doing that. And so, you articulated earlier that you need to develop some diplomatic skills and some networking skills. So out of your repertoire of skills, the steely-eyed special tactics warrior, was it more diplomatic? Was it more flanking maneuvers? Like, what did you just have to approach each member of the frozen middle differently, or how'd you do that?
Yeah, I think it was good that my operational time really helped me with that, because literally every scenario, I treated it as its own. I didn't have a cookie cutter approach to it, if you will. Sometimes I had to outflank people and burn bridges, but at those points, I felt it was for the best good of whoever I was advocating for, whether it was the special tactics guys, whether it was the cadets. I didn't mind burning bridges with some of the people that I had to kind of outflank and outmaneuver and kind of scheme around them, and do it all on the up and up. But I wasn't afraid that when immediate folks above me would tell me no, I was not afraid to keep going with what I needed to do. And I think that's what we need in some of our in our officers today. And again, not to go around people's backs, not to try to subvert, lawful orders and all that kind of stuff. But when you're trying to advocate for the men and women that are out there, that are either at the tip of the spear, or out there doing the mission downrange, or even supporting at home, I think you got to do what's in the best interest of them. And if the original person or the immediate person tells you no of whatever you feel is truly the thing that's going to keep those people alive or equipped or trained, then you can't just take no as your first answer. And again, you got to do it the right way. But that I think was something I was good at. And I think it did get me in trouble sometimes, but at the same time, I can sleep at night knowing that whenever you have that, that middle area where you're trying to convince things that hey, yes, it's going to cause us more work, because that's what I've found is when more work is involved, a lot of people like to just automatically say no. So, I found that, not taking no for an answer, well, up to a certain point, there's a point where you get told no and it's a no. I get it. But it's riding that line. If you truly feel like this is in the best interest of your team, your men and women, acquiescing at the first bit of resistance was something I was good at not doing. And again, then other scenarios, it was building coalitions, it was building teams, it was using diplomacy and using your words to try to get people on your side. And it, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But every scenario that I went into was definitely different. And you know, whether I was sitting at an ambassador's table in an embassy, you know, downrange, or that's where I learned a lot of there's a lot of words that need to come out of your mouth to make things happen.
Yeah, that's good perspective. All right, so we take this young man out of Southern California where he's wreaking havoc on the baseball field and football field, right? And he moves to Colorado Springs. He goes to the prep school. He goes to the Air Force Academy. He serves for 2 decades, so nearly 25 years, basically developing your leadership skills as an airman. And then you're like, yeah, so what I'm going to do with that? I'm going to take it to a cubicle, right? So explain what that
Yeah.
transition was like, and what was that experience? How did you transition your leadership from literally working the case on the combat field, in the staff, on training cadets, in the football field, in the classroom, to now you're in a cubicle? What is that transition like?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll say it was tough because and at that point I was making a decision more for the family than for myself. So I can suck it up and do anything. So the point was, up to this point I have been traveling a lot, as numerous people do, right? But with the kids being so young, I wanted to make a choice along with my beautiful bride, saying, hey, do you want to be a part of this, growing up with the kids, or helping the kids grow up, kind of thing, or keep trying to do cool jobs and be traveling all the time. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's, like you said, I'm glad I married a woman a lot smarter than me, because again, I was looking at it from that perspective that, man, this is a great job, this is a cool job, I'm enjoying this. And I wasn't really taking that second and third order effects into account. And so I was like, you're right. I'll take a desk job. I'll do it. I can do anything. I can take a desk job. And I'll tell you, it was with a great company. It was a great culture. I mean, there was great people there. I mean, the pay was great, all that kind of stuff. Great, great, great. But it was just not fulfilling. I mean, at all. I felt no, I felt really nothing towards it. So I wasn't, there was other people that worked there that were just like, man, this is an amazing job, amazing place, this is so cool. And I'm like, God, am I a heartless bastard? Like, do I have no soul? Because I don't feel anything here. I mean, I didn't dislike anybody. It just was not fulfilling. So I went to work, and I kind of liken it to like office space. The TPS report needs to be done, and I was going to throw a copier out the window, kind of thing. But yeah, so I had to transition. I think even harder than my first transition into the staff world, because my first, again, it was a unique experience. I'm in a branch with combat controllers, PJs, guys that are team guys, that, again, it was a different environment. So this was definitely a hard transition for me. And I wasn't, the hardest thing is I was not in a leadership role whatsoever. I was in a worker role, which I was like, hey, I can do that. I don't have to, have any responsibility. But after that first 30 days that I was there, like, I got so many things piled onto me right away that were transitioning me to more leadership type of thing, taking care of projects with 200 plus people and all this kind of stuff. So I could see that they were quickly transitioning me more from the worker bee type of thing to more, we'll call it middle management, if you will. And that wasn't a bad deal. I just had to treat it was kind of tough, because, again, it's in the civilian world. It is not the military. It is, people are there to collect a paycheck, and some people love it, some people are just there to, like I said, get their paycheck. And so you got to find, what I found in that short time that I was in corporate America, I was having to utilize my skills of figuring out what is incentivizing that person specifically to get this done, or to help me out, or help this project out. So I can say I learned a lot in a very short period of, okay, this is what I need to find first is what is their motivation behind this to help coerce them. Again, I wasn't their boss, so that makes it even harder to try to lead someone that doesn't feel like you're their leader or that you're their boss or anything like that. So I had to quickly transition to, how do I make people do things that I'm being told have to be done, but I can't tell them that they have to do it, right? So that was a very big challenge. And I only worked at that company for 3 months, but within those 3 months, it was eye-opening to kind of see my skills of manipulating people to not in any kind of bad or immoral, illegal way, but just trying to get them to do the things that the project needed them to do when they had really I had no teeth behind anything I could bring to the table. So that was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it is. You're having to convince people to do things they don't want to do, and it's almost. I mean, you have 3 children, and you guys foster kids as well, and so I don't like to liken leadership to parenting, but there's a lot of crosswalk between the two, and it sounds like that's what you experienced. So you're sitting there, you're in the cubicle, you're playing the music in the car, you're beating up the printer with the bat, right? You want to do that, and you're like, you know what, I've got to get out of this. I'm losing my soul. I'm losing what makes me DK Newman. And so you go from that, and you're like, I'm gonna go set up adventure races. Why? Because you do the 24-hour race in Vegas. I've tracked you doing that a couple times because you're that kind of person, which is fascinating. I watch NASCAR, right? It's the same thing over and over again. You just don't do 24 to 30 obstacles and run, an ultra marathon at the same time. But some reason you like to do that. And so I guess what spurred you? What was that thing that went, I'm going to go from this cubicle thing to, I'm just going to go make people pay me to get dirty and muddy and have a good experience?
Well, so just quick correction is, so the Spartan race director job was right when I retired. So that was my first job. So that right there, before I got out, going through TAP and, all that kind of stuff, I was really treating it kind of like a mission. I was gathering intel, talking to people, building my network, because that's what everybody said, network, all that kind of stuff. And it is absolutely imperative on the transition is the networking piece and figuring out what the hell do you want to do. Because I'll tell you, I had offers to go do contracting work for, $2,500, $3,000 a day. But it was a 2 months on, 2 months off type of job. And so that was already a non-starter. But so I tried to figure out, all right, what do I want to do? So then I quickly came to the realization, I got something messed up in my head. I love adventure races. I love, those obstacle course races. So I just started looking it up, like, hey, do they have any jobs? And they had a race director job, which is kind of the pinnacle of, that's a big deal, which to me, I was like, okay, cool, I'll just apply for it. Come to find out, that is typically the company will bring you in and you'll work your way up to that if they think you're worth it. And so I'm just throwing my resume out there like, hey, no big deal, I want that race director job. And I didn't hear back from anybody. So then I go through a TAP class or one of those transition classes. They're like, yeah, you got to network and know somebody. I'm like, oh crap, I have done none of that. So I actually, what's funny is at the time, the main person of the CAG for the CEO of Spartan, she was a previous JSOC enlisted gal, and I didn't know her, but looking at her LinkedIn, we were, there was some crossover of time. So I reached out to her and I'm like, hey, this is who I am. I was a combat controller, this blah, blah, blah. She writes back, she goes, do you know this person, this person? Like, she was kind of checking if I knew some people. And I was like, yep, knew them, this, blah, blah, blah. And then the next day I got a call from the head of their recruiting, of, their HR. And so that's what got my foot in the door. And then I did a bunch of interviews, and then I was a race director for Spartan Race. And man, that was, talk about like fulfilling job for me. It felt like, because I was leading people, because you're leading anywhere between 100 to 150 people. And it's a no fail mission, in the sense that, hey, that race weekend's happening on that set date. No matter what you do prior to it, you have to run that, you have to host that race that's coming up. So I loved that. Like, people thought that was a lot of pressure. I just loved it. I loved working with the people in the company, because they were pretty bought in. They felt fulfilled. You know, you're building things out, you're developing the race, the course, and then you have 30,000 people coming through the weekend and making sure everybody gets through it safe, right? So it was awesome. But that's where I felt like I was leading people. I felt like I was, making things happen. But that's where my beautiful bride came in and said, "Hey, man, do you want to be with your family or not?" So that's kind of brings me back to what I said earlier, was, hey, you got to put your big boy pants on and get a real big boy job, not these fun jobs. All right. And I'm like, you got it. All right. You're right. Because that job, in that first year that I did it, I was gone 120 days. So, that's, a couple weeks out of every month that you're pretty much gone, or, here and there, all that kind of stuff. So it took a lot of time away from home, which that wasn't my priority. So again, my smart wife told me, "Hey, put your big boy pants on and go find a real job." And I was, great. Okay. So I found that desk job up in Denver. And so then that led me to, which made it even worse, going into cubicle world after, the time in the military, then the Spartan time, then going into the office world, which again, good people, good job. It just was not for me.
Yeah, copy. And thanks for the timeline. I can't believe I flipped those two, but yeah, that tracks. And I could picture Deb saying that, so that's pretty legit. So
Yeah.
so you're in a cubicle, you're like, okay, I'm not being fulfilled, is your words earlier, right? You mentally transition, you're there with the family, you guys are enjoying the Springs life, and so then you needed to transition again. So walk us through that change and how you went from that to being a small business owner.
Yeah. That's almost gotten me killed a couple times from Deborah. So luckily she hasn't killed me yet. But yeah, so I blame it on her, because one day my son and I were driving her crazy. Apparently, she said, "Look, you two get out of the house, go do something, go to the go-kart track, go do something." So we said, okay. The go-kart track wouldn't let us ride on the same course. I'd have to go upstairs while Magnus, rode around the bottom. Well, that's stupid. We want to do something together. So we went to this place called Dart Wars, and it's an indoor Nerf battle arena. We went, had a blast. I was like, holy cow, what a great concept. I love it. It's kind of that in between of, laser tag. It's a little more than laser tag, but it's not quite paintball or airsoft. So, you're kind of hitting that, I don't know, 8 to 12-year-old kind of range, right? And we had a blast. And then my girls got into it. We started going, once a week kind of thing, maybe, every other week. And then the place just shut down. And I'm like, what the hell? I mean, it was a great concept. And all the time that I was coming into the store, I was looking at it from a perspective of, okay, that guy I would hire, or I'd keep on staff if I opened a new one and competed with these guys. The way they do X, Y, and Z, oh, I'd keep that, or I'd change that. And I thought, man, I'd love to open my own place and try to compete with these guys. And well, they went out of business. And the short version of that is the owners actually reached back out to me after I had multiple emails to them. And they said, yeah, we're looking for new owners. And I bought in, opened the place back up. Within 30 days, I cut my ties with them, because they were doing a lot of criminal things on their side of the house, and I didn't want to be associated with it. And I just started Dart Wars with an S. Theirs was WARZ. So mine's just regular WARS. And I changed a lot of things operationally. And with the team of kids that I have here, because primarily I have high school kids that work for me, um, I treat it like I did in the team room. I tell them I trust them. I train them up the way I want them to be trained. I give them right and left limits, but I let them go out and execute. I tell them they're my experts. They're the ones dealing with the customers. They're the ones that are, solving the daily problem and providing the fun for the people. So why wouldn't I trust them to make decisions? And so I give them that authority. I give them that freedom to do their job and make decisions. And I empower them. That's what I do. And I tell you what, these kids like just crush it here. I mean, anytime people come in and say, "Man, we loved it. You got a great system. You got a great this and that," it's because of the team and the level of responsibility I give to them, and they take it and run with it. It is awesome. So yeah, so because of Deborah forcing me and Magnus to go out and come to this place, I reopened it when it closed and, changed a bunch of things operationally, but the fundamentals of, it's an indoor Nerf battle arena. And basically just, bring people in to have some fun parties or, just walk in and play. And then, like you said in the beginning, it's grown to where opening a second facility here in Colorado Springs. And over the past year and a half, I've been working on the franchising piece and it's starting to take off. So it's a hair on fire journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome it almost sounds like you were able to leverage all the skills that you've developed over time. And now you transition it to where you're teasing out the salient points and applying them at the right place at the right time. And for the record, we can reflect that this is all Deborah's fault. So we can bring that up in
It's
anytime
recorded. It's true.
It's recorded. Yeah. It's going to be on the internet. So it's true. So, so I guess the question, give us a vignette. You have one of these teammates that you hired, one of these teenagers, and he's got a special skill. He likes to 3D print. So talk us through how you leverage innovation even in your space and how you gave the perspective of trade space for one of your employees to be innovative and where that's going.
Yeah, so I try to again give some leeway to these kids in really all the roles, but one of the young men that I hired, his passion is 3D printing, and within this community, there's a lot of modifications that can happen. I mean, you've been to the store and you can modify these guns and 3D print things. I mean, it's pretty amazing what can be done to some of these Nerf blasters. But this kid's passion is 3D printing and nerfing in general, playing and all that kind of stuff. And so I told him, I said, man, let's we started, the reason I have a pro shop, so he's one of the guys that fixes blasters, because these Nerf blasters are not meant for the abuse that they go through in our arenas. I mean, we average about 2,000 players a month. And so these blasters are not made for that. So I have a couple pro shop guys that they fix our own blasters when they break. If they're hard broke, we just buy a new one. But I try to cannibalize, try to, fix what we can. But we also, modify them and sell them. We've sold them all over the world. It's pretty cool. But one of the problems we started seeing was in our motorized blasters, the flywheels, one of the components in there just keeps breaking because of the constant use. And Nerf, I wouldn't make any flywheels either, because why would Nerf make a $2 component that would fix a blaster when they could just go buy, someone has to now go buy a new one, because no one in the world has been able to 3D print one of these flywheels because it is such a high impact, high stress item that just nobody's figured it out yet. Well, I gave him the task. I said, hey, I think you're smart enough. I think you can figure this out. And so for the past 6 to 8 months, he's been, designing, he loves to design too. So I've been challenging him. He's been designing flywheels. And what's great about, we can ops test it right here in our arena. And if it breaks, we just throw another one in or just give a new blaster to somebody. And we try to figure out, okay, what broke? So we, go through the after action process. So I'm opening their eyes to these things of, okay, hey, let's think about something, get your hypothesis going. All right, let's test it. All right, let's figure it out. Let's design something. Let's test it. And then let's go back to the drawing board and after action it, and then figure out where we can start from next time. And we are at the point where we've got an operational product that no one else in the world has, and we can start selling that. So from a monetary revenue perspective, that's going to be awesome. But from a store perspective, now when those things break, I don't have to pay $100, $150 for a new one. I can throw a 80-cent flywheel back in there and fix it. So that's the fun, innovative piece, along with, I keep pushing him for designs. He's been designing different pieces, designing different things that we sell. I mean, so it's been pretty fun.
Yeah, so you're speaking of innovation, which is a buzzword bingo, right? So what
Yeah.
one of the things we talked about at in a recent meeting I was in is, sometimes when organizations decide they want to innovate, they go, step one is build an organization to innovate. But it sounds like what you did is you had the talent and you just gave them the trade space. Now the question is, how do you enable and then incentivize or even pay back that talent? How are you approaching that from a leadership perspective?
Oh yeah. So again, this is from a civilian perspective, right? So it's about, well, there's two things for this. Again, it's finding those key points at which motivate him to do it, and it's not necessarily money, right? For him, it's the recognition that that's his product. And I told him, look, I don't need any credit to this. This is your deal. This is your product. We're going to put on there that it's made by Mason. This is Mason's deal. He designed it. I don't want to steal any of your thunder. So that right there, took him from like, down here to like just up here of being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be that invents this, because I just kept pushing him like, you can do this, you can do this. And then from the financing part of it, I pay for the stuff for him to experiment with. I mean, the materials is not cheap. So from that perspective, he's getting like a backed, endorsed, paid for, ability to do his hobby and experiment with stuff. So I know that motivated him. So I knew I would take a hit from a financial perspective, but that kept him going to where now we have a good product, that now when we sell them, I'll buy them from him unless I take all the stuff. But anyways, the kind of thought is he's going to get a royalty from it too, because man, it's his deal. I'm not trying to steal it. It's just I want to be able to sell them. So he makes them, I'll sell them, and then he gets a piece of it. So that's the motivation. He gets the credit and he gets a piece of the royalty, gets a royalty of it, and it's a win-win scenario.
The irony is what you've done in a sense in Dart Wars is create almost what some of the large tech companies in Silicon Valley have done and carved out, and they've given seed money, if you will. You read the book Drive, you read all these things that articulate, hey, take some company time and work on the things that motivate you, and it pays back the company. And it's you read books on that, but then to get to see it at a scale of your size is pretty awesome, and I think that's commendable. So we took a leadership journey, right? You walked us through all the different places where you applied leadership, but really you walked us through how you grew your leadership. There's books out there that say leaders are born, they're not made. There's research to codify on both, whatever the perspective. I think it's an individual experience from my personal opinion. But so you've gone through all that. So now looking back at your advanced age, perspective of leadership, because you've led in all these different environments, kind of what are your top maybe 2-3 leadership anchor points that they're your go-to? If you're running METTC on this problem set, these are your 3 things that you're going to go to first, because those are things you have in your kit bag that you don't even need to look, you can find it in the dark. So what are those couple anchor points that you focus on?
Yeah, so the first one would be you got to set the example and set the expectation first. being a leader doesn't absolve anybody from, being the example of what should be done. That's the first thing. You got to emulate what you're telling your people to do, or how to do things. The second part is empowering your folks, and by empowering them, I don't mean let them run wild and do whatever they want. That's absolutely not it. But if your team, doesn't matter if it's, a special ops team, a maintenance team, a comms team, it doesn't matter if they don't feel empowered, and that you've got their back, that you trust them to do their job as the experts, you're not going to get anywhere in leadership. And then the third thing is just being there for your team, like taking care of the team, whatever. And that can mean a lot of different things, but I think it's just because it's my third point. I think it's probably one of the most important things is along with that empowerment and emulating what you want by being the example. If a team, or if they don't feel like you as a leader are trying to take care of them or looking out for their best interests, and I don't mean in like, materialistic type of things, but if they truly don't think that their leader is looking out for them, and you've probably had plenty of leaders out there as well as I have, that you just sit there and go, wow, that guy or gal has none of our interests in mind. They care about themselves. I mean, it is very apparent. So I think being genuine and taking care of your people is an incredible part of being a leader.
Okay, those are tremendous, and I appreciate that. All right, so now I'm going to start to ask you some tough personal questions, right?
Oh boy.
All right, so can you give us an example of where you had a leadership success, a vignette, and then a leadership failure?
What's funny is looking back at the past 25 years kind of thing. I think the biggest aha things has been since owning Dart Wars, amazingly enough, because in the military, when I reflect, I mean, we have a rank structure. Sometimes it's difficult to be a leader when there is that rank structure, because people have to do what you say, at some points. And that's not a true test of being a leader in my mind. I think there's a lot of scenarios where in the military you have to lead, absolutely. But what I've found is, now that I'm not in the military, I mean, these kids can tell me to pound sand and nothing's going to happen, right? So I can tell you these past 3 years of owning Dart Wars has been both highs and lows of quote leadership. All right. And so the first one, I would say the something I'm proud of leadership wise for the past few years, or anytime really. So one thing I focus on, getting to the point here, sorry, here at Dart Wars is I have taken, foster kids, group home teens, kids with disabilities, and hired them. I've taken the risk. They've had some rough upbringing, and I feel like, hey, this is something that I can take a risk on and try to develop them into young men, young women that by coaching them and mentoring them and being a good, an example of what a leader should be. So I've had a few kids. So generally, not one specific thing, because there's been a few. I've had some group home teens and foster teens that have worked here, and I've seen them move on from here by giving them the guidance and the leadership and the coaching, to do some really awesome things over these past 3 years. They've gotten their lives together. They've moved on from this, what I would consider entry level job, and moved on to more, kind of professional jobs. One went into the military, one into the Army. And I stay in contact with him still. Actually, he just got back, and he's at Fort Carson. He called me the other day. But anyways, that's my high point of leadership is taking these folks that can give a rat's butt about what you say, because they don't have to, right? There's nothing that is forcing them to do what you say. and watching them become a team, that has been my proudest thing, is watching these kids become a team that functions autonomously. Now it scares me because I'm not needed, because these guys, I mean, they run dart wars. I mean, and I'm like, wow, I'm pretty useless here. Like I show up and they're like, ah, who's this dude? So that's been my proudest thing. Now, the other part too is, you know, I wish I could say that I've been perfect in my leadership style with some of these kids. And I've had to take that journey myself in figuring out what is the best way for me to be able to be a good leader for these kids. And I can tell you, I definitely I have failed, and you know, you get some disgruntled people, and then they, you sometimes you take it personally, and you're like, you know, like any human would, and you go, well, it's you, it's not me. And then I try to sit down and discuss things with them and other people and figure out, hey, what went wrong here? And then when all signs point right back to me, I'm like, wow, okay, yep, you know, this, I can't be emotional about it. It's my fault. So I've had both those ups and downs these past 3 years, because I got to be honest, over my 20 years in, um, I had it pretty easy. I had some incredible senior NCOs, NCOs, airmen that just are like the epitome of fire and forget. So like a monkey could lead these guys. So you know, I try to equate it to some of the great stuff that happened over my past 20 years. Like, yeah, that was totally me. But I mean, looking back at it, uh, I mean, a monkey could have done as good a job with the amazing people I've been with, right? So those ones, yes, I'm proud of a lot of the stuff I've done, and yes, I made mistakes like a lot of us have done, but I found that over these past 3 years on the civilian side has been I think my biggest growth point in leadership. You know, the thing I'm most proud of, and also the thing that I'm kind of least proud of how I approach the leadership style with these guys.
Hey, you know, I got to be honest with you. I think you're probably the first veteran that I've spoken to that codified their leadership development after, you know, a full career of service as mainly being the most developed and most experiential after retirement. And so it's a pretty fascinating perspective. That's great to hear. All right, last two quick challenging questions. What would you say is your biggest leadership strength, and what would you say is your biggest leadership weakness?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say my biggest weakness leadership wise is to not try to dictate everything, to be the guy that, you know, knows everything, to assert myself and everything. I think that's been one of the hardest things for me personally, to not be that micromanager, if you will. um I mean, from a subordinate perspective, it is the worst thing in the world to be micromanaged. As a leader, I think that's one of the hardest things to do, is to trust your team. You know, give them the right and left limits, but let them thrive. And I think that's constantly one of my struggles, especially now that I'm out, because this is my business, right? I mean, this is my livelihood, and you know, trusting it to high school kids, that's a hard thing to do. But I think now turning it around that same point, um, I think my biggest strength is taking care of the team, from a leadership perspective. You know, not just you know, I try to build that relationship. I try to figure out what makes people tick. I try to figure out how can I help them personally, and I do that here as well as when I was on the teams, of how do I take care of this guy because he's sacrificing so much. Here it's okay, how do I set these kids up for success? You know, is it to get them into a trade school? Is it to get them connected with people I know? Is it to help them, you know, what can I do for their college entrance stuff? I think my biggest strength is definitely taking care of people.
That's good. Well, DK, I thank you for that. All right, this is the part at the end of the hour where I turn it over to you and give you a couple of minutes to riff on leadership for anybody we've got a couple that dialed in tonight, but anybody that listens to this in the future. So over to you to riff on leadership.
All right. Yeah, I think it's it is a sacred thing to be put in a position of leadership. I think at every level, people have the opportunity to lead. It doesn't matter what level you're at. It doesn't matter what your job is. But I think that leadership is sacred, and it's got to be taken seriously. I know as a young man, I don't think I took it as serious as I should have, just because I wasn't exposed to what a good leader should be. And I quickly, through my time in the beginning of the Air Force, I got exposed to great leaders, and it really opened my eyes. So I would say leadership is incredibly impactful on people's lives, and people need to be that driving force for good and take care of people and be good leaders, because I think throughout any job, any career field, anything like that, we've all been exposed to good and bad leaders, and that bad leader has a lot of impact on people. And I think that it's because leadership is that incredibly important aspect that is sometimes just undervalued, and I think it's changed a lot over these past 20-25 years. I think there's been a lot more emphasis on creating leaders versus, oh, you're an officer, you're automatically a leader. And I think it's trickled to where, most importantly, to the senior enlisted guys, the NCOs that are truly leading the young guys, right? And it's amazing seeing that professionalism and that opportunity that everybody's getting, I think, better developed as a leader. But overall, leadership is an incredibly sacred thing that is, it makes or breaks a unit, and makes or breaks a team, and I think it is very important.
Yeah, those are wise words. Well, as I often do in these, is I end up taking almost a full page of notes, which I write really small, so that's pretty heavy. And so I just want to hit a couple of the high points, although I don't know how you follow your last bit, but you stressed about determining how far you need to push as a leader, because sometimes you've got to do that to take care of your team. You talked about how networking is important in multiple phases, whether it's just leadership, achieving what you want to do, or transitioning is key. You need to empower those that you're fortunate to lead. You need to leverage the innovative minds that you're around. You talked about your three anchors are you set the example, empower your team, and set expectations, and then take care of that team. And then your final nugget, I got to say, this is one of the first time I've ever heard it couched this way, which is leadership is a sacred, and I'm adding, experience. And so you can't take that for granted. And so, DK, thanks. We got to walk through what is a pretty incredible leadership journey, to be honest with you, to come from Southern California to work your way through the United States Air Force Academy, to serve our nation in multiple capacities, both times special. And then and to
I
lead
need
it
that extra. Yeah.
and to lead that, and then to transition, to keep what drove you, which is the experience, and to take that into the environment, but yet to understand the anchor is probably the things that most matter, which is your family, the Newman family. And then that puts you into an environment where you transition a little bit too heavy, you swung to the right, you lost your joy, you wanted to beat up some printers and copiers. But then as Deb would do, Deb puts you in the right environment for success, and here you are, giving people joy, allowing homeschool groups, hosting foster kids, hiring teens that need support, and then even being couched as one of the top businesses in Colorado Springs during the pandemic. of all things. And so you opened your first Start Wars right at the beginning of the pandemic, and somehow you kept it going. And that's a true testament to leadership experience. But hey, brother, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. It's always great to talk to you, and I appreciate the flexibility. And I want to thank everybody that was able to join us tonight, and anybody that's listening to this after the fact, where we hosted Dylan DK Newman to talk through leadership at multiple levels, both in the military, in sports, in operations, in business, and at home. And so next month, we're going to bring in another military member, or transition at a different point, but went into industry and is now moved around through industry. We're going to bring him in the middle of May, and then we're going to wrap up in December with a very, very special guest. So stay tuned for that in December. DK, thanks so much for joining us in Lagniappe Leadership Discussion. This is Dr. Jim Gumbo Coughlin, going to close it out, just saying lead from the front, and thanks for your time. Have a good time.
Hey, thanks, Gumbo.